views and opinions expressed by callers, guests, and hosts do not necessarily reflect those of the Black Talk Radio Network and Black Talk Media Project. Black Talk Radio is new black media for the new millennium. Conversation Reparations. Welcome to the next show of Conversation Reparations, brought to you by the National Coalition of Blacks for Reparations in America. My name is Brother Jamoke Setayo. Also co-hosting with me is
Benita Lacey.
All right. I serve as the Southeast Regional Representative of NCOBRA and also the male co-chair of the Atlanta chapter of NCOBRA. And Benita also serves as the female co-chair of the Atlanta chapter of NCOBRA. And today we really have a dynamic show in store for people. We spent some time talking about H.R. 40 and Senate Bill 1083 on previous shows. And what we're going to do today is sort of dig into how different cities and different states have been localizing their reparations efforts. And I think this is an important strategy because one of the examples I often use is the example of Martin Luther King's birthday becoming a federal holiday. And one of the things that helped to lead that is because we know Conyers introduced the bill in 1968 right after King was assassinated, and he himself even confessed that he just did it because he was a young radical congressperson and he wanted to do something to honor King, not really even knowing that was thinking that it was really realistic that it could become law. But what happened is there was a momentum that began to build up with different cities and different states, different unions and different organizations supporting the idea of Martin Luther King becoming birthday being a national holiday. And so as that momentum built up, 15 years later, it evolved to, and of course I like to always add, Stevie Wonder had a nice, added an important component to it, and it ended up becoming a federal holiday, Martin Luther King's birthday. And a lot of people didn't feel like that was going to be possible. It was not going to happen in the United States, and we never get an African-American holiday in the United States. And so, so the point I was just making is just that part of the strategy that got to it becoming a federal holiday was the groundswell at the local levels. And so that's what we're going to talk about today. There's a lot of momentum around reparations. There's also a lot of at the federal level. As I said, we've talked about this before, and actually I just saw an email today that has now raised the congressional co-sponsors of H.R. 40 count The last time I think we reported out it was about 106, and now it's 116. So it continues to grow. But like I said, we want to on this show we're going to look into how people have been looking at moving this reparations conversation at the local level, city level, and as well as state level.
Brother Jamoke, just want to let you know that I believe you have one of your scheduled guests on the line.
Okay, great, because I was
from the
hoping I wasn't going to
Chicago
have to keep
area.
ad-libbing too much longer. Brother Kamm Howard on the line?
Yes, what's going on, Brother Jamoke?
Hey, brother, man, how you doing? Good, good. So, yeah, so as I was saying, one of the cities in my mind that has really shown by example and have taken leadership in this whole idea of localizing the reparations movement. And even as I was making my notes today, I was like, wow, I had, looking at all of it at one time. And, I really, at one point, Brother Kamm, we were planning on doing this show, giving you the full hour, but we probably, we could come back and, revisit some of these issues. But I think we should just touch on many of them, from the Chicago Slavery Disclosure Act to the Transatlantic Slave Trade Commission to the Presidential Reparations Commission to the University of Chicago reparations fight to the Norfolk Southern Railroad reparations fight to the hospital fight to the police chief Burge reparations victory. So you all have a lot, to as an example for other cities and other states to look at that, Chicago and the state of Illinois has done. So that's why we subtitled this Chicago and Pennsylvania leading the way, because I really do believe that Chicago has set a great example in doing a lot of work at advancing the reparations movement at the local level and at the state level. So let's go ahead and just have Brother Kamm Howard is the national male co-chair of NCOBRA, as well as the legislative male co-chair of the Legislative Commission of NCOBRA, and also works with other formations representing NCOBRA and the reparations movement. So why don't you just tell us a little bit of your background, Brother Kamm, and how you got connected with NCOBRA and the Legislative Commission?
Well, excuse me, my background is I'm a real estate investor, businessman in South Side Chicago. But, living in Chicago, you see the results of the what we now call crimes that have been committed, the bad acts that have been committed against our people over the centuries. We see it glaringly in a lot of the challenges that we face as residents of this city. And so I think I got into the reparations movement right around the time that the House had apologized for enslavement. We got fully in about a year or two later when the Senate had apologized. I always had was keen on the idea of fighting for redress for our people, but I hadn't actually joined NCOBRA. I had read about it, heard about it, but I hadn't actually joined. I think I joined in 2006 and began just doing actions on the local level and moving my way up into the place of leadership, first as a board member at large and then as a commission chair of the Legislative Commission, which I held that position for a number of years. I think right at the time that President Obama became elected, I think in 2009 I was appointed. At that particular time, there was a House, Senate, and the presidency was all controlled by the Democrats. Congressman Conyers wanted to renew a push on his legislation and invited NCOBRA up to Detroit at that time, and I was appointed to Legislative Commission chair then. And we've been married to H.R. 40, through the good and bad times. Certainly we had a good time with HR 40. We had a fantastic, marvelous, great time with HR 40. At this particular point, we had the best time we've ever been since its introduction. So,
yes. Yeah, I can imagine that Conyers must be like really thinking about, what it means that we have over 116. We have 116 now co-sponsors on HR 40, like just unprecedented. Yeah.
We still have a long way to go. I
Still
was
have a
at
long way to
the,
go.
on HR 40. I was at the, and I'll get to the local in a second, but just want to touch on HR 40. I was at the Congressional Caucus weekend event Thursday. There was on HR 40, and I wanted to stress what work we still have to do on HR 40. We have 116 co-sponsors. The next step is to get it out of committee, which is called a markup, where there's debate and vote at the committee level. It's never made it out of committee. And right now, there's 17 Republicans. We have 17 of the 24 Democrats who are on the Judiciary Committee have co-sponsored. But there's 7 still Democrats who have not made a decision. So if it was to go to a markup now, we would not win. So our job is to, Cobra and others, is to get these other 7 Democrats, at least 4 of them, to co-sponsor. And then we're looking at having to get to the number 150 co-sponsors before it moves to the House floor. So if we get a positive vote in the Judiciary Committee, it goes to the House floor, and we want to have at least 150 co-sponsors by the time it gets to the House floor, because you can't add any more co-sponsors once it gets to the floor. And so we'll be well on our way to getting this passed if these things fall into line. So that's the work ahead of us.
Yes, yeah, appreciate you bringing that to us. Do you have a list of those 7 Democratic holdouts, or maybe a list of the 4 that we're trying to tip the scale with? Or if not now, we can always, address that at a later point.
Yeah, we want to get that list done, put it on our website, and we'll be getting that on our website within the next week. But quickly, Stacey McBath, she's a...
Lucy McBath.
Yes.
Yeah,
Lucy McBath.
McBath. Yeah, I know her. That she's from Georgia.
Yeah, from your home state, brother. We need y'all to put some, do some phone calling, man. Get them on.
Yeah, we've been working on that. We've been working on her.
We're working on the system.
We'll continue to work on her.
Yeah.
I didn't realize she was on the Judiciary Committee. Okay, so we got to work even.
Yeah, I can get that list off. She's the only one of percent that we should be able to do some immediate type of movement on, understanding that now we're at this particular point of 116 sponsors, and we're at a place where we need to take a vote. So, we're putting the list down.
Sure. All right, so like I said, I don't know if you heard me run off the list of all of the Chicago and Illinois reparations campaigns, or maybe not even all of them, but some of the major ones. But I know we have a bill that you're proposing, that you're working with for Coalition of People to put forward on September 18th, but I thought we might want to discuss some of these other local initiatives that have happened in Chicago and the state of Illinois before we get to that. So perhaps
in 2000, we passed a city resolution in support of HR 40. And that same year, 2000, we passed the first municipal slave disclosure ordinance that required any corporation or institution that wanted to do business with the city that they would disclose that they had to research their records and disclose if they found any records pertaining to enslavement. And that was followed up by about 19 or 20 other cities who then also created slavery disclosure resolutions. I think I don't know exactly when the Indaba was, but I think it had a birth in Chicago.
Right.
In 2006, I think, or 2006, I think it was we got past the first and only state-sponsored slavery commission. They put out 2 reports, one in 2007 and again in 2001 and 2008, to look at some of the abuses, even in laws in the state of Illinois. People think because it was a northern state, it didn't have any complicity with the enslavement of our ancestors. But we know a lot of the industry and cottage industries and say that became full industries were financed by Southern enslavement, as well as most of your northern universities. And in Illinois, the first two governors were enslavers of Illinois County, of Illinois Territory, I should say. So that report was produced in 2013 or 14. State Representative LaShawn Ford had passed through the Illinois legislature with a unanimous vote that President Obama created a presidential commission, and then he just did the same thing in Trump's first year of presidency. He had a resolution passed in the state of Illinois calling on President Trump to craft a slavery commission. So so that's kind of the legislative thing that we've been able to push in this, going back again since 2000. What we're introducing on Wednesday will be the first legislative move since the 2001 legislation in the city, although we've had the 3 state-sponsored legislation. Well, the city council, the John Birch reparations, you did mention that, was actually a payment that we did get actual redress from. So Chicago's been busy. We feel we have a lot more work to do. I know we have a lot more work to do with the city or a resolution that we're going to introduce. And then we did some major actions against corporations. Norfolk Southern Railroad, you mentioned that. They were seeking to buy some city land to expand their rail yard. And we brought up the whole issue of reparations of the crimes they committed during enslavement and for 50, 60 years after enslavement with the convict leasing system, leasing our ancestors from the state and working them on their railroads, clearing land and repairing track, etc. And they worked them harder than they were worked during enslavement, literally worked them to death. So we brought that out, and we were able to get the corporation to capitulate to some of the issues that were being raised in our community around environmental injustices that the corporation was dealing with. And so we were able to get those victories in that regards, having them install higher diesel emission standards equipment than what they originally wanted to install. And that was only because we raised the reparations issue. And then there was some community benefits agreements that some people were raising that they were able to get the railroad to agree to because we raised the reparations issue. We went up against Rush University Medical Center. We know that a lot of these institutions, again, had teaching education institutions, especially the early medical institutions, had a history of abuse of our ancestors, experimentation, etc., on their bodies to build a market to bring students, especially from Europe, to some of these schools. So we've been at work, and there's always work to be done on the local level because at the local level where our ancestors actually injured, where the crimes are actually committed on the local level, even though it was a result of federal legislation and federal policy, but it was at the local levels where it was actually the actions were actually committed, crimes were actually committed. So we say in every city there's an institution or business that we should be going out there on a regular basis because they're, so much of their history, the economic history of this country is tied to the enslavement of our ancestors.
That's right. Well, I know you kind of went over those kind of fast, and like I said, we'll have to figure out a way. We'll bring you back on to kind of delineate some of these in a little bit more detail. I think, because I mean, you and I both know about these incidences, but I want to just kind of break it down for people who are listening, like the Presidential Reparations Commission, for example, based again around HR 40, but instead of saying that Congress would set up a commission, that the president could set up a commission, and that Obama could have set up a presidential commission on reparations, as well as Trump could set up a reparations commission. So just wanted to bring that out a little bit more. And I think also significant, we didn't talk about yet, the University of Chicago, is how some of the demands that have been made in Chicago, there's a level of consciousness to understand that it's a reparations demand. Because, see, you all could have fought the whole Norfolk Southern thing just from a perspective of, they're not doing right in the black community, as opposed to bringing in a reparations lens. And, that's, I think, is something that is significant and important. Like, what made me think about is here in Atlanta, for example, when there was building a new sports dome, sports arena, and the community was organizing and pushing back because it sits right next to, again, a low-income neighborhood, and the question is, y'all going to invest $1 billion? The city's going to invest $500 million, and then a private developer's going to invest another $500 million, and so the request was just for $30 million to be invested in the community right near the dome. But again, we could have made that maybe through a reparations lens, with the particular corporations and things like that. But it wasn't fought from that particular perspective. So again, go ahead.
Yeah, and what you find is when you interject the reparations issue, you're giving more leverage to those other entities who are not pushing they're simply wanting, not simply, they're demanding justice, but not from the standpoint of historical wrongs. And so, like with the Norfolk Southern case, there were a lot of environmental groups who were pushing back on Norfolk Southern, but they were getting absolutely nowhere. In fact, Norfolk Southern refused to even talk to them. City Council was not hearing anything. But when we brought in the reparations issue, it forced them to look at everything. And it was reported that they capitulated, and they did capitulate. They were forced to capitulate because what we were going after was $17 million, which was a 6% of the project cost that they were engaged in. And instead of dealing with us with the $17 million, which would have been a major reparations victory, they went ahead and decided that they would spend the millions of dollars necessary to retrograde their equipment, which they weren't going to do had we not interjected this reparations issue.
Yeah. So yeah. Well, time is moving by. So why don't let's get into the current bill right now that you all are about to introduce.
Brother Jamoke, before you do that, and greetings to Brother Kamm Howard and Sister Bonita. This is Scotty, the sound engineer. We need to take an early station identification break so that I can reset our line. I apologize. We're getting used to this new Uber conference setup, which is pretty slick, and I like it from a producer standpoint, but I got to get used to where all the controls are, and also let the listeners know if you're a scheduled guest, you'll hear it when we reset the line. Nobody will get hung up on. Don't sweat that. But I need to mute everyone coming in, and then you just hit star to unmute yourself, and I'll get the current speakers unmuted. So apologies for interrupting. It's on me, and I'm just trying to get used to the new board.
All right. We appreciate all you do to engineer these shows, Brother Scotty. We appreciate you.
You are tuned in to the Black Talk Radio Network. For podcasts and live program scheduling, visit us on the web at blacktalkradionetwork.com. And we're back. We're back. Brother Jamoke, your mic is open. I do believe the representative is on the line joining us from Pennsylvania as well. But everybody's mic is open.
All right. Very good. All right. So, just maybe because since we did touch on it, why don't we just briefly talk about the University of Chicago piece, and then you could give us an update on the current bill that's coming before the Chicago City Council.
Yeah, like I mentioned, quite a few northern universities, southern ones as well, but certainly some of the early northern universities were funded via monies that were earned from enslaved African labor, as well as like Georgetown, the actual university was built by enslaved African labor. But the University of Chicago, which is one of the premier universities in this country, has shaped political and economic policy for the last maybe 70, 80 years in this country, had its origin with a man called Stephen Douglas. Stephen Douglas ran against President Lincoln, and we heard of the famous Lincoln-Douglas debates. But he married a woman in Mississippi whose father was a very wealthy enslaver, criminal. And upon her father's death, he inherited her estate, because at that time, women could not have direct inheritance. But anyway, he inherited the estate. He moved to Illinois, started a political career and a real estate career in Illinois. Left his estate in the hands of his overseer, who was by Mississippi state standards. Other enslavers said he was the worst enslaver, most cruel enslaver in the state. And Stephen Douglas had written to him about it, and from other enslavers saying you had to do something with this guy, and he ignored it. And subsequently, having made a bigger fortune in Illinois in real estate, he bequeathed the first land that the University of Chicago was built on to the university. And so it has its origins, the university has its origins as a result of the money that was made off enslavement and the money that he inherited from his wife's father's criminality. And the University of Chicago has been saying, they don't have any ties because that land, the university moved to its current campus about 20 years later, that they went bankrupt or whatever, but they took with them all of their donors, they took with them all of their books, most of their professors. So there's actually was no really break in the university, just that they moved from previous land that they had. So we've had some college law students, as well as law professors, show that predecessor connection, that the university, even though it just moved, it originally went bankrupt, and that it moved from locations, it was still the same entity. As a result of that struggle, we're still, trying to convince the city that the university has committed fraud and that it has not filed slavery disclosure reports for the 20 years that the law has been in place. And as a result, every contract, according to the law, every contract at the University of Chicago has been should be halted. And that even plays into the building of the presidential library, the Obama Center, because the University of Chicago is the leading entity in that particular project. And so we were trying to get that shut down until they entered into some type of an agreement, community benefits agreement with an organization that is pushing that Obama Center community benefits agreement piece, as well as the students who uncovered this information on the university. They also had some demands, and so we were trying to use the law center, the Obama Center, as a leverage to force them into some type of negotiations with the community, and that's ongoing.
Yes. Yeah, I've brother Guy Emerson Mount, who you introduced me to, who's moved down here to Atlanta now and teaches at a school that I think he teaches in Alabama.
Mm-hmm.
But it's been keeping me up to date on that situation. Let me know that that's still an ongoing fight. I know he was one of the leaders in that fight at the University of Chicago.
As a doctoral student in history, he and 3 other doctoral students did the actual research and uncovered that, and put it out in a report. And so, yeah, it is an ongoing fight.
All right. Well, very good. So let's briefly get into this bill and let us know what we need to know about that, and then we're going to transition and hear from Brother Christopher Rapp, who's the Pennsylvania state representative that's introduced a statewide bill on reparations. And of course, Cam, you can hang on and chime in if you want to. Right now, you could just give us an update on this, what we need to know about the current bill as Chicago continues to lead the way on reparations.
For sure. What's interesting about this entire process is that most of the reparations fights in Chicago have been led by grassroots, and even the slavery disclosure ordinance that was introduced by Alderman Tillman was even one that was organized at the grassroots level and then taken to a representative, a councilwoman, who was strong enough to see and visionary enough to see its potential. But this particular issue is being led by a wealthy businessman. In fact, he, a businessman by the name of Reverend Willie Wilson, Dr. Reverend Willie Wilson, who's also ran for mayor a couple of times in the city. He was inspired by the presidential debates where they talked about reparations, and he decided that he was going to get into the fight and push a reparations legislation in the city of Chicago. And so he got together some politicians who he felt would craft the legislation. Well, he brought in some representatives at the city level as well as the state level, because they're going to introduce a state level as well, a state bill similar, and brought them together to agree to introduce legislation. There was a commissioner who he called a lawyer to actually craft it. And then he went around the city having town hall meetings. And at the very first meeting, I made a statement that I thought that this was a correct choice of venue for a reparations commission at the city level and at the state level. And subsequently, with Incova's backing, we were able to give wider support and to actually change the resolution from the way it was originally designed. The way it was originally designed was one that would deal primarily with people of African descendants of American descendants of slavery who were under the poverty line. And so we know there's a lot of contention around the use of ADOS as representative of all people of African descent whose ancestors experienced the harms of enslavement in this country. So we didn't want it to be a partisan piece, and we didn't want it to be something strictly only for people who are impoverished. And we wanted it to complement the national legislation and be in alignment with international norms. So that was a lot of stuff we wanted to alter in the bill. We were successful in persuading Dr. Wilson. Commissioner Boykins brought in Conrad Worrell, who solidified Incova's position in working with Dr. Wilson and Alderman Ross Sawyer, who's going to introduce the bill, or actually the resolution. The resolution is calling for a commission to craft public policy in alignment with the international norms of full reparations, protection and guarantees of non-repetition, restitution, compensation, satisfaction, and rehabilitation. So this commission will be funded with the initial amount of $1 million, and the commission will become a permanent part of the city government and will last for 20 years. We didn't want anything like a quick fix, and we wanted something that would have ongoing oversight of all of the public policy that's created or crafted, that's designed to be crafted around the repair of our people. We noted that this year marks the 100th anniversary of the killing of the young brother who swam over into the quote-unquote white side of the beach, and he was stoned to death, and that sparked over a week of rioting of white folks coming into our community, looting, killing. I think over 300 people were killed during that 1919 quote-unquote race riot. This year marks the 50th anniversary of the Chicago Police Department and the State Attorney's Department murder of Chairman Fred Hampton. We indicated that in this resolution. We also indicated, as we talked about earlier, the number of actions by the city of Chicago and state of Illinois legislatively around this issue. And so we informed the current city council of the history of that particular body in regards to reparations and what their duty is today. This current group of politicians, what their duties are today in regards to this fuller knowledge that we have about injury as well as repair.
All right.
Their resolution.
So I'll give you a chance to say some last words. One question I have also, just in terms of the politics of this bill. So just like you were giving us a rundown of the members of the Judiciary Committee in terms of the City Council, what's the likelihood or how are the numbers looking in terms of this bill being passed, resolution being passed?
So there are 50 city council members in the city of Chicago. 20 of them are of African descent. So far, we have one white vote. We have, and we only need 26 votes. We have 9 Hispanic votes, and we don't have the full Black caucus yet, but we're working on it. But we do believe we have already in place 28 votes. But we won't know that until it's going to be introduced on Wednesday. We plan on having a large mobilization out there, press conference, and then we go to a subcommittee, and the subcommittee will be charged with crafting how the ordinance will actually look. So it's not it's not going to be voted on Wednesday. It will just be introduced, and then we have to go to work.
Right. Any word from your new mayor on it?
No, but we do know that before she was mayor, in 2004, 5, she was working for this high-powered law firm in the city of Chicago, Brown and Mayer, and they were happened to be one of the law firms that were who were for the defendants in the slavery disclosure and the slavery lawsuit that we had, and they selected Ms. Lightfoot to be the lead lawyer in defending why the corporation should not have to pay.
Interesting.
So I know I didn't explain it very well, but yeah, she was she argued oral arguments in that case against Black people receiving reparations.
I got it. All right. So you have any, like I said, you're welcome to stay on the call and continue to participate. You had any closing remarks you want to leave us with? And it sounded like, Bonita, you wanted to add something?
I did not. I just wanted to thank him because I know we have another guest on hold too.
Okay.
Yeah, I was just wondering, my closing argument is that you have a lot of work to do. everywhere we live, we should be in this movement. State of Pennsylvania, state of New York has a bill. Here, Chicago, I think Vermont. There's a lot of work to do, and we can win. We just mobilize.
All right, very good. Thank you, Brother Kamm. We want to go ahead and introduce a state representative, Christopher Rabb. I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing that right or not.
You are.
Okay, great. To give us an update. I don't know how long you've been listening or not, but to let us know of the work that you are doing in terms of bringing reparations at the statewide level. You've heard what's been going on in Chicago as well as in the state of Illinois. And as we know, also some stuff is going on in Vermont, which we need to find out more about as well. And in New York, we heard Kamm, and I also heard Charles Barron speak about the reparations bill that he has in New York as well, State Assemblyman Charles Barron. So we were able to get you on the call, though, so we want to hear what you're doing in the state of Pennsylvania.
Thank you. Well, first and foremost, I'm a native Chicagoan.
All right.
So I just put that out there right now. I actually grew up not far from the University of Chicago, and I'm not surprised of its historic connection to slavery. As a graduate of Yale University, I have sought for a long time to make the connection between its wealth on this planet and its extraction of value from enslaved African laborers. And after 29 years of fighting the good fight against a residential college at Yale named after a white supremacist, John C. Calhoun, about a year or two ago, they changed the name. I would have preferred it if they named it after a black abolitionist, but at least there was modest progress on that front. But I adopted Philly as my home 17 years ago. I was elected to office the same night what's his name won. And I represent 65,000 people in Northwest Philly, in the largest full-time state legislature in the country. And 3 weeks ago, on the 400th anniversary of the arrival of enslaved Africans in Jamestown, I formally announced in the form of a co-sponsorship memo my intent to introduce a state-based reparations bill. And the idea behind it, the conceptual framework for this forthcoming bill, is to do more than just have a commission. It is also about a formal apology and an explicit acknowledgement that the disparities, the racial inequities that persist in this country and the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania was not due to cultural deficiencies of Black folk or the bad choices of individuals, but it was born of racist public policy on the federal and state and local levels.
That's right.
On the last point, as it relates to the financial redress for Black folk, it does not call for cutting a check or providing cash to Black folk. It will likely be an opt-in annual entitlement where folks can apply for it. So for Black folk who don't believe in reparations, they have nothing to worry about. Nobody's going to make them take money. For Black folk who don't identify as Black, you're not eligible, because this should only be for folks who have consistently over X number of years self-identify as Black. So for all the Cablinasian, Tiger Wood folk out there who don't identify as Black, you ain't getting a dime. This is for folks who both can prove that they have identified in terms of formal documentation as Black or African American, and it's for folks who want to receive reparations. So that's the opt-in part. They have to have residency in Pennsylvania, and the longer their African ancestors have been in Pennsylvania, the longer they have a Black connection to multiple policy eras in Pennsylvania, the larger entitlement they get. So if you just move to Philly and you're Black, whether or not you can identify an enslaved ancestor in the United States or in Pennsylvania, you get something, but you get the most if you can identify that you descend from an enslaved Black Pennsylvanian and your family has been here for generations. Because the premise of this bill is that Pennsylvania has been complicit in racist policy, directly and indirectly, has benefited from slavery well after gradual abolition began in this Commonwealth in 1780. Therefore, if you had a Black presence in Pennsylvania, the longer you've been here, the more susceptible you have been to racist policies that have marginalized you and decreased the likelihood that you have benefited from all the other opportunities that white folks often take for granted. So that's kind of new. I haven't seen that in other state legislation. I also, it's a major departure from what other folks are doing, is we're trying to front load the research before a commission is even created. When you think about the first efforts to do this, and you think about Congressman John Connors out of Detroit, H.R. 40, it was a different time. It was before the internet. It was before digitization of documents. Now, what would take researchers then months and years to compile could take us seconds, minutes, hours to compile. Every single state law from 1776 to the present in Pennsylvania is now accessible for free by anyone who has a library card. So I don't know if when previous state lawmakers in Pennsylvania introduced the reparations bill back in 1995, which was the same year that the internet was, born to and made available to the average, global citizen, that the stuff was digitized so that they could actually do that research. So a commission back then made more sense because you have to find researchers who could actually do that work, and there'd be money set aside for that labor. Whereas now we have kind of democratized access to information, and there are a lot of experts, whether they have formal education or not, whether they work for government or not, or a university or not, and we can research right now in ways that a commission would have had to take years. So I'm really trying to document, before I introduce this bill in the coming months, all the laws that Pennsylvania has on the books since 1776 that document that white supremacist perspective on Black life across the Commonwealth. And I assure you that most of my colleagues will not know the range of things that acutely and negatively impacted Black folk across Pennsylvania, because how would they know? This is not something that's well documented in most public schools. It's not documented by corporate media. It's not documented in most quarters. So this may be the first time ever that the general public and people in positions of influence will actually know the history of public policy that has negatively impacted Black people for centuries in Pennsylvania. And I'm really excited that we're about to get started on this. In fact, this week I'm having a research meeting with a number of stakeholders, and we're going to share the information that we find in real time, so that people don't say, I know that when I was growing up in Chicago, and white folk and their kids were saying, oh, you're complaining about racism, slavery, ended 150 years ago, get over it, as though somehow there was a level playing field once the 13th Amendment was ratified. And that is aggressively ignorant. So what we're really trying to do is fill the void, so that no one has the luxury of ignorance. And we can say, well, actually, here are all the things that happened on the federal and state level that led to the disparities we're dealing with now in places like Philadelphia, where the deep poverty rate is 26%, where half of Black folk are living in poverty. It's the poorest big city in the country. It is the highest incarcerating city in the world. And we can be able to start connecting the dots between where we are now and when gradual abolition began back in 1780 and say, this is no accident, this is not the choice or a pattern of bad decisions that individual Black people make. This is actually by design, based on state government and private industry, because I heard the previous conversation before I got on. Private industry is culpable too, exceptionally right. So. This bill only deals with state government, but this does not give a pass to the religious orders, whether the Jesuits, you mentioned Georgetown, one of the descendants of the enslaved laborers at Georgetown I went to school with in Hyde Park in Chicago. He lives in suburban D.C., but he's actually one of the recipients of reparations from Georgetown. That's real stuff. So in addition to what state government does, we can also say what happens on a municipal level, what happens in the private sector, what happens in philanthropy, right? Because some of the largest foundations were funded by the largest corporations that directly or indirectly benefited from enslaved labor. So this is just the beginning. But even just putting together the research, if this bill goes nowhere, and frankly, my chamber, the Pennsylvania House of Representatives and the state Senate, are controlled by the Tea Party here in Pennsylvania. So it's a right-wing extremist cadre of Republicans that control it. So this bill will not see the light of day as long as they're in leadership. But the information, the objective data around what Pennsylvania did and continues to do will be made available to journalists, to academics, to activists, to youth, to teachers, whomever, so that we can move the conversation forward, so that people will no longer have a leg to stand on when they try to put out these specious arguments about why we shouldn't get our fair share and why we should not have the type of acknowledgement and reparative initiatives that will make us whole.
All right, we're coming towards the end of the show. Appreciate your sharing your vision and how you're going about this. And one of the things I think that I'm also hearing is that this is going to be like an ongoing process that you really just starting out. So we can definitely bring you back on as things develop with this process that you're moving forward. One of the things I just wanted to really point I felt out to make sure we discuss is that we do have a Philadelphia and Cobra chapter, and Brother Ari Morenazon and other activists there. In
That's right.
I don't know if you've been in
communication. They're the ones who came to me. So it's because of Minister Ari and his folks that said, hey, will you do this? They entrusted me with leading on this legislation. So I want to give a big shout out to them. And Ari's one of my constituents.
Oh, awesome. Yeah. And then also there's another brother. We have some connection with some folks in Pittsburgh as well that are doing some good work there that, maybe you might want to connect with as well.
That's right. That's right. They got some good they got some good publicity recently in the newspaper in Pittsburgh. And I was approached by one of the Black state representatives in that area saying that they just heard about the work they're doing. So I hope to work closely with all of these folks you mentioned.
Oh, very, very good. Very, very good. So
I appreciate you coming on. I do have a statement more than a question. This is Anita. And my statement to legislators is, especially Democratic and independent legislators, are we afraid to have discussions around reparations with Republicans and make them bring to light their views? So that's my statement. I think we should have those conversations regardless of if it goes nowhere, because we're not pulling them to the carpet if we don't say anything at all.
It's a great point.
Yeah, and following up on that, I was on a panel some time ago with it was a conservative African-American Republican, I guess he calls himself, on the panel, and was talking about strategy and the problems of the Democratic Party and all of that. And, reparations isn't a Democratic or Republican issue. We think that, perhaps the Democrats will be more sensitive to reparations, but it really isn't a Democrat or Republican issue. It's really a justice issue. And I think we should always keep that in mind. Even when I mentioned in the beginning of the show, Martin Luther King's birthday, national holiday, that was signed into law by Ronald Wilson Reagan, right? So, again, I think that's, a good point that Bonita brings up, that we should not be afraid to challenge them and to bring this message to all of the elected officials, Democrat or Republican, or whatever their party affiliation. So, Cam, I imagine you had a comment or two about what Brother Representative laid out in his resolution. You still with us, Cam?
Yeah, brother. Hello?
Yeah, we hear you.
Oh, okay. I didn't hear you. I stepped away from the phone. So I'm sorry.
I was saying, do you have any comments or questions for our dear representative in terms of the strategy or the ideas behind his legislative bill that he's proposing?
No, I think it was very interesting, the manner in which he's going about it. I was excited listening to him and, look to learn more from that process.
Okay.
What we found out is that, there's no one way to eat this elephant, man.
Yeah.
We, Brother Ari, if he's working with Brother Ari, I know that he's going to get some work done.
Sure. Yeah. All right. So is there, Representative Rabb, is there anything that you want to just close out your conversation with, and as we wrap up the show?
Well, I want to thank you all for leading this discussion. It's an important one. We got to continue with this. We can't be self-conscious or reticent. We have to be bold and resolute to continue to make this happen. Reparations is not new. Many folks have gotten reparations, including other black folk, whether it's in Rosewood in Florida, folks in North Carolina who were sterilized without their consent or knowledge, any number of folks. So this is not new. This is appropriate. And I just want to say, too, in Pennsylvania, they saw fit to set aside nearly $500 million in tax credits. Now, that's a form of corporate welfare, if you ask me. When they talk about black folks' needs, they try to tie it to the welfare state. But the reality is, we put money towards what we consider most valuable, and there would not be the type of financial wealth in this country if it were not for the efforts, the skills, the black genius of our ancestors. And so we have to do right by them and keep pushing on and being bold and innovative and unapologetic for what we deserve.
All right.
Thank
you. So you've been listening to Conversation Reparations, the bi-monthly right now, twice a month radio show sponsored by NCOBA, the National Coalition of Blacks for Reparations in America, hosted by Brother Jamoke and Sister Bonita. And we had a really good show today. We spent time talking with our brother Kamm Howard and initiatives that's been going on in Chicago and the state of Illinois to address reparations at the state level and at the city level. And then also just finished listening to Representative Rabb in terms of his putting forward a bill. I guess you haven't put it forward yet. You said you just announced that you're putting forward. But beginning to put forward legislation that would address reparations at the state level in Pennsylvania. So we're going to continue to track that and follow that, as well as continue to track and follow what's going on in Chicago, which, again, that bill will just be introduced. Resolution will be introduced on the 18th, and then there'll be, as Kamm kept saying throughout this call, work that will have to be done to follow up with that, as well as work that has to be done to follow up with the legislation in Pennsylvania, and as well as other cities and other states as they continue to latch onto this movement and carry it forward. So we give thanks for all of the workers. Again, a shout out again also to our Cobra chapter in Philadelphia for their great work, and definitely the Chicago chapter of Cobra. And we appreciate everybody, and we're going to continue to move this work forward.
So to all the organizations out there and grassroots groups, please join an Cobra affiliate in your city or your state, and let's move together collectively so that we can have a bigger impact and a quicker impact on reparations now.
Both our guests and our website is incobraonline.org. That's incobra, N-C-O-B-R-A online.org. You can find out more information.